Hello there! Welcome to Skeleton Key Productions. I'm Conor Graves Cocon. Let's get into the video. Today's video, we're going to be looking at the biography of the none and only Walt Disney, right? So obviously we know that he wasn't a director, so most of this film review stuff that we're going to be doing now is focusing mainly on directors, but Walt Disney played such a pivotal role both in the founding of like the Disney Corporation and in the actual production of the films, the actual making of the film stuff, especially in those early days. So we're going to pay homage to him, and we're going to be looking at his biography with this video. So buckle up and obviously hit the like button if you haven't already. If you haven't, now's your opportunity to do it. And obviously as well, if you haven't subscribed, join the gang. The water's lovely out here. Yeah, subscribe. We've got plenty more of these film videos to be doing. So yeah, so buckle up and yeah, without further ado, let's go for the ride. So Walt Disney was born on the 5th of December 1901 in Hermosa, which is a suburban neighborhood in the city of Chicago. At the moment, that city is about 90% Latino, but obviously at the turn of the last century, it was a predominantly white suburb, right? So Walt was born there. He was the fourth out of 5 children. And after a few years, his father decided to move the family to Kansas City, Missouri, right? So while he was in Kansas City, Missouri, this is where Walt ended up making friends with someone. And this kid, like their family, were really into motion pictures and into vaudeville. So vaudeville, this is where people would often go for entertainment back in those days. There was singing, there was dancing, there was comedy, all these kind of things, right? So this really inspired Walt Disney and made him really want to get into the entertainment industry. Now, to get money, him and one of his brothers used to do a paper round, right? So they used to wake up every morning at 4:30 in the morning in order to go about and distribute these papers. But this obviously had an impact on his schooling, right? Because obviously he was like quite tired in class, he found it difficult to concentrate, and as a result, his grades weren't so good. So he went to his father and said, "Look, Dad, I really want to become an artist. I want to become a cartoonist, right? So please can I like do that?" And his father ended up paying for Saturday courses, yeah, for him to take, right, in order for him to become a cartoonist. So when it's 1917, obviously World War One, America joins World War One, and young Walt, he's only like 15, 16. And when he's at school, he's drawing kind of propaganda cartoons, yeah, to kind of boost like the kind of war effort in his school. And he's really passionate and he wants to go and fight in France, right? However, obviously he's too young, yeah, and so he tries to get in any which way he can. And one of the ways he can is if you're 17 years old, back in those days, you could join the Red Cross, right? And so he lied about his age, right? He forged his birth certificate. He tried to say that he was born in 1900 rather than 1901. And as a result, he ended up getting the pass to end up becoming an ambulance driver for the Red Cross out in France. However, by the time he ends up getting over to France, the armistice has been signed already, right? So this is November 1918, and so the war is actually over now. However, obviously, there's still things, he needs to drive about these people here, or to drive, so he still has things to do. And whilst he's out there, he ends up drawing pictures on the side of the ambulance van, right? And these pictures end up getting noticed by Stars and Stripes, which is the kind of like magazine for American soldiers and stuff. So he ends up getting some notoriety from there, although he doesn't necessarily get any kind of like paid job from there, right? But still, he ends up doing that. When he comes back to America, he no longer feels like a little kid anymore. He feels that he's a grown man, and he decides, right, I'm going to set up my own company. So he's 18 years old and he sets up his first company, and this is with one of his friends. So for all you people out there who are 18 years old, you're slacking, you're bumming about, etc., bear that in mind. Walt Disney, he set up his first company at age 18, and a quote that Walt Disney said, which has always really stuck with me, this is why he's a big inspiration for me, right, is something along the lines of like, if you want something done, right, stop talking about it and start doing it, right? So same thing with this channel, same thing with lots of different things, right? I could have sat here for ages and like thought, oh, should I do this, should I do it? No, just stop talking about it, just start doing it, right? You learn as you go, you learn from your mistakes. That's the best advice I'd give to someone in their early 20s and like in their like late teens. Just start doing it and you'll learn from your mistakes anyway, right? I've learned from my mistakes, everyone has, right? And a lot more mistakes in the future, but that's how we move, right? That's how you grow. But anyway, enough that kind of like motivational talk. But the point with this is him setting up a business, yeah, with one of his friends, as often happens, right? They end up having a falling out, right? So what they end up having fallen out over is his friend wanted to do a cutout animation, right? And Walt wanted to do cell animation. So cutout animation, this is obviously where you have like, little things, you cut them out, etc., and move the pieces, etc. And that is a lot easier to do. However, it doesn't look as good. On the other hand, cell animation is where you draw each thing. And obviously back in those days before you had like kind of like, computer animation and stuff, right? Each frame had to be drawn by hand from scratch, right? That's often why you see like, a lot of things that like were done like by Disney and stuff. They end up having like the same kind of clips, yeah, for multiple different like things, because it takes so long to draw things from scratch. You may as well just keep reusing the same stuff, right? But anyway, so that's takes longer, but it looks better. And so Walt Disney decided to, go part ways with his friend, and he decided that he was going to go along that route, right? So he ended up setting up Gram Studios, and while he was doing that, he ended up making one of the first things, which was Alice's Wonderland. So many years later, he'd make Alice in Wonderland, but this was Alice's Wonderland, right? So this is a 12.5-minute long cartoon. This ended up getting him some sort of fame. He ended up getting some sort of notoriety from this. However, obviously, by the time he was 21, he went bankrupt, right? So he sets up his first company at age 18. By 21, he's bankrupt. So again, things can go bad. Yeah, like when you're young, again, you try different things, you fail, but you learn from things. Yeah, like Walt Disney didn't just give up at age 21 and go, you know what, I'm just going to work in a cheese factory, right? What he did instead is he was like, okay, I've failed. Now I need to pick up and I need to learn from this, right? So 5 years later, when he's age 26, he ends up making Steamboat Willie, right? So this is the creation, this is the advent of Mickey Mouse, right? So Mickey Mouse actually was originally going to be called Mortimer Mouse, but his wife, so at that time, he already met a wife and was settling down with a family and stuff. She said, no, Mortimer sounds a bit too pretentious. Yeah, call him Mickey, right? So this is Steamboat Willie. This is Mickey Mouse. This is where Disney's career really starts to pick up and stuff. This is in 1928. In 1930, he ends up making Three Little Pigs, right? So, this is like the first kind of colorized cartoon that he makes. So before that, Steamboat Willie is obviously in black and white, and then you've got Three Little Pigs, which is in color. So this is really kind of he's really like starting to experiment with new technology and really trying things out and stuff. This is one of the hallmarks of Disney. He always was quite a pioneer when it came to new technology. He didn't shy away from it, right? So that's 1930. He ends up doing that. And then he ends up embarking on a project in 1934. And this project takes 3 years to do. And this is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So his idea for this was, instead of doing little short clips and stuff, little 12-minute things here, etc., what he decided to do is going to make a feature-length film, right? No one had ever done this before. Everyone was saying, you're crazy, this will never work, it's going to take you so long, why would you even, it's just not possible. Yeah, you can make a film that long, but to make an animation that lasts that long, no, you have a storyline and songs, and no, that's just not going to work, right? But he pushed through with that. 3 years they were working on that, and when the premiere came out in 1937, people were stunned, right? And people were absolutely blown away. And in the space of 2 years, so by 1939, it was already the highest grossing film of all time at that point. And when you adjust for inflation, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is still, to this day, the highest grossing animated film of all time, right? No question, right? So at this point here, started a company, gone bankrupt, worked on something for 3 years, everyone's saying it's crazy. look at where he ended up, right? So yeah, so you never look back from that point then. But the next two films end up coming out in 1940, right? And the thing with these is that they were much bigger budget. So you had Pinocchio, which is very expensive, and then also you had Fantasia. Now both of these were like really kind of revolutionary stuff. The songs in them, the music in them, really really great stuff, right? However, both of them were very expensive, and it came out just at the time when World War II had started, right? So this meant that the European markets were like all kind of like, you weren't able to really get things through. And also as well, the war in the Pacific was kind of heating up as well. So as a result, it didn't do, both these films didn't do so well at the box office, especially considering the huge cost that had gone into them. So this meant that the Disney Corporation was in a whole lot of debt. The fact they were in debt meant that they had to do pay cuts and layoffs and stuff. This obviously led to people going on strike. Now, Walt Disney, up until this point, right, had been a kind of like liberal Democrat and stuff, right? And he viewed his staff pretty much as like family. And so when they all went out on strike, this had like a really fundamental kind of like impact on him, because he was like, well, like kind of, I felt like I'm being betrayed and stuff. And around this time, this is where he ends up becoming more conservative, right? So instead of backing the Democrats, he ends up backing the Republicans. So in 1940, he ends up backing Thomas Dewey for the presidency. We've covered Dewey in like previous videos as well. Someone recently complimented me trying to say that I looked like Thomas Dewey. I think it's just more the fact of there hasn't been a politician since him who's had any sort of facial hair, right? That I think that might probably have more to do with it, but anyway, so he ended up becoming more conservative. And during this time as well, during the 1940s, he ends up doing lots of like war propaganda and stuff for the American war effort. So you have the Führer's face, where you have like Donald Duck taking the mick out of like Hitler and like Mussolini and all these kind of things. And then later on as well, like he ends up being a part of the kind of McCarthyist era. So he ends up testifying for the FBI, for like different communists who are in Hollywood and stuff. So he plays quite an active role in that, just like with Ronald Reagan as well. So all of this is kind of going on during the 1940s. And so in 1941, with all these strikes, with all these issues, what he then does is he makes Dumbo, which is really, really low budget. It's really stripped back. It's half of the budget that Snow White had, and it's less than a third of the budget that Pinocchio had. But still, Dumbo ends up being a roaring success. And this ends up lifting up the Disney Corporation. If it hadn't been for Dumbo, more likely than not, like Disney, we probably wouldn't have even heard about it yet. Probably would have gone under, and it would have just been like every other kind of like company around that time. But still, end up picking back up, and this is where you started to have more of a rebound for the Disney Corporation. So then after World War II, you end up having the Song of the South, which is really, really controversial. Even at the time, it was very controversial. So it came out in 1946, and because of its like depiction of slavery and stuff, lots of different people like protested against it, etc. But still, in spite of that, like it ended up doing very well, ended up being very successful. And then a few years after that, in 1950, you end up having a Cinderella, right? So Cinderella was really successful, really like that, so the company's really picking up. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of run through the list of like the major kind of films. I'm not going to focus so much on the kind of like live action films. So you had, I can't remember some of their names and stuff, yeah, right? But for me, I kind of like prefer more like the cartoon based ones. So yeah, so those are the ones I'm going to be focused on. I'm focusing more on Walt Disney animation. So yeah, so you end up having Cinderella in 1950, like we said. And then you end up having Alice in Wonderland, which comes out in 1951. So remember we said like, all the way back at the start of his career, he made Alice's Wonderland. Now he could actually like, with the technology and with the money and with everything, he could actually make that into a feature-length film, which he did in 1951. And then you had Peter Pan comes out in 1953. You end up having Lady and Entrapment that comes out in 1955. You have Sleeping Beauty, which comes out in 1959. You have 101 Dalmatians, which comes out in 1961. You end up having The Sword and the Stone, which comes out in 1963. And then you end up obviously having Mary Poppins, which comes out in 1964, which is again really, really successful. Again, one of the highest grossing films of all time, especially, you know, it's like half animated, like half live action. Got lots and lots of like Oscars and awards and stuff. So now we're kind of coming towards like the end of like Disney's life, and it was around this time that he sets up the first Disneyland, right? So obviously, you know, Disneyland, they've got them in all different places all around the world nowadays, but you know, around this time, this is when he set up the first one. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to create fun theme parks, yeah, that were safe for kids, right? Because most other theme parks before, they were quite seedy. You wouldn't really want your kids to be kind of like left there and stuff. But like you know, he wanted to create somewhere that was fun and somewhere that was safe and stuff, yeah, that where like you know, the whole family could go and enjoy themselves. So that was really what he kind of like started focusing a lot of time on. But he still ended up producing some other films, right? So the last film that he like, officially kind of like produced was The Jungle Book, right? And this came out in 1967. And then the final film that he gave the go-ahead for was The Aristocats, and this came out in 1970. However, Walt Disney ended up dying in 1966 in, I think, was the 15th of December 1966 in Burbank, California. And the reason he ended up dying is as a result of lung cancer. So all those years ago, when he was working as an ambulance driver, right, in World War One, that's when he ended up picking up the habit of smoking, and yeah, he ended up dying of lung cancer at age 65. So Walt Disney obviously revolutionized, you know, like animation. He revolutionized film. The Disney Corporation today, let's talk less about that. I think the corporation, as it's turned out today, I think he'd be turning in his grave in some regards, because obviously the agenda that they have is so contrary to kind of the, you know, the values that he had. But obviously that happens with a lot of corporations. They end up becoming, you know, imbued with their own kind of like agenda and stuff, and with their own kind of culture, and that often gets very divorced from the people who kind of found it and stuff, yeah. So Walt Disney today, he wouldn't be proud of Disney in terms of some of the angle that they've gone at, right? But I think he would be very proud of the success of his brand and the success of his films. And even nowadays, yeah, the films, he probably would never have signed off on these films, especially the ones that came out in the kind of yeah, the Disney Renaissance in the 1990s and stuff, and like more recent films. But still, I think that, you know, he started a legacy. Yeah, he was really inspirational, and that's what we're going to be looking at over the course of the next few weeks. So all the films that I mentioned, apart from like the really like, you know, the old ones and stuff, right? So everything from Snow White up until the Aristocats, we're going to be doing 1 week in, 1 week out and stuff, right? So yeah, so for the next few weeks, that's what we're going to be covering. So definitely stay tuned for that. And then obviously we're gonna, once we've finished all the Disney films, then we're going to be going on to the next director, and then the next director, and the next director and stuff, right? If you want a bit of a breakdown on like how we're going to structure the film reviews playlist, I'd highly recommend watching the video that came before this, because that's basically, you know, so it's the film reviews intro that explains like what the kind of like deal is moving forward. But in the meantime, have a great day and bye. And this is when Walt Disney really fell in love with the whole kind of like entertainment industry, and that's when he decided, damn you, ice cream man. Oh,